the way that these things work is even if both chambers of Congress pass a bill, it's up to the Speaker of the House to send that on to the president. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but in general, it's at the prerogative of the Speaker of the House. And so if Nancy Pelosi wants to continue this two-track strategy and hold up the bipartisan bill until a reconciliation bill comes over from the Senate, she can still do that, even if the House passes that bipartisan bill. Now, there will obviously be pressure on her to send that to the president at that point, but I think Nancy Pelosi can handle a little bit of pressure.
And if we remember, like she's done that in the past in a different scenario. If you remember, after they passed impeachment articles against Trump, she held on to those for a very long time, as she waited for some type of concessions and guarantees from how the Senate would handle the impeachment trial.
Yeah, that's right. And so she can play that same game, and then everything that was in play before in terms of waiting for the Senate to pass still is operative. And the other thing this does is it adds an element of time and a deadline that was not actually there before to the reconciliation package. Now, Senate leaders and House leaders can tell their charges, look, we need to get a bill done. You need to resolve your differences by the end of September, and we need to move this process forward. So that forcing mechanism is usually what leads Congress to actually get something onto the table. And so I think at some level, Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are happy with having that deadline.
Throughout this entire process, No Labels, which is a dark money group funded by a lot of hedge fund and private equity billionaires, had insisted that all they really wanted was to get shovels in the ground as quickly as possible. This wasn't about reconciliation. It's not about blowing up the child care tax credit. It's not about stopping carried interest taxes from going up. It's really just about infrastructure and getting it out as fast as possible. Now, in their internal memo, we see that no, in fact, the entire thing was about trying to decouple these, trying to take leverage away from progressives so that they could go after the reconciliation package. Kim, do you think that it being now known that this was the entire point of their effort the whole way through will hurt them a bit when they come around again in a month and try to take it down?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're going to be falling on their swords a little bit on this one. I think they're underestimating just simply how popular a lot of the policies are that are in this larger package. People want these things that are going to be helping their children, helping their families. And so I do think that they're underestimating the power of that. I don't think people care. I mean, look, infrastructure is really important, right? We do need new roads. We need, all of these bridges and whatnot. But I think people care more about how are they going to get through day to day. And this other larger package gives them some of that comfort and some of that cushion. So I think it's really interesting that they're sort of like, oh, no, we really just want shovels in the ground. And that's not really clearly what's going on here. But they're also really underestimating the power of this progressive caucus. That's, I think, 100 members strong, right? Mm-hmm. So they're definitely going to be pushing this through together. And I think these guys might have used their political leverage a little too soon.
With any identity politics, there is the danger that you can oversubscribe someone's values or intent just because of who they are or where they come from. I think everyone's an individual, and at the end of the day, you can't lose track of that. But certainly the broader gestalt of things, I think, are benefited by having folks with that kind of economic diversity as well. And I think the whole history of the left is this struggle between incrementalism, reformism, and people who are accused of trying to do too much too fast. And I think we're all collectively in the project of trying to find where that sweet spot is of what the moment can bear. And I really do think that there always at all times needs to be some cohort of the population that's willing to push probably 10 degrees farther than the moment would bear to make sure that we aren't leaving anything on the table.
Well, and Brianna, I think you made one really good point, which is that the two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, are largely seen as corporately owned on both ends of the spectrum. And I do think that there's a bit of a generational moment that we're seeing that's a populist moment on both sides of things, where you have, part of the Trump appeal was that he was speaking to working class, hardworking Americans who felt like the system was rigged against them in favor of big corporations, the elites, big money. And it wasn't that dissimilar in the broadest strokes from the Bernie Sanders message. I have to wonder, do you think there's a generational shift against this? Power equals money. Those in power have to be the wealthiest, and sort of this push that we need more people who represent the working class.
I think there absolutely is. What's the stat about the majority of people under the age of 40 having positive views of socialism and negative views of capitalism? I mean, the world is very much changing, and I think it's because so many folks in my generation and the generations behind me have been done a disservice. Many of us jumped through every capitalist hoop we were told to jump through, the hoops that inert enormous benefit to generations before me, and still end up feeling enormous amounts of precarity. I'm going to hop off of this call and call up my bad health insurance company who sent me an email yesterday saying that for some reason I've been kicked off my plan, right? No one should have to deal with this level of insult when you're relatively affluent and successful in the richest country in the history of the world. Now, what that means in terms of political outcomes, who knows? Because there is a lock on this two-party system, and both parties, including Democrats, continue to make it very difficult for third parties to enter the race because I think they understand what threat that poses. The majority of Americans identify as independent more than they do Republican or Democrat, and we all know that there's an enormous amount of people who never vote, largely because they perceive it to be the case, not wrongly, that neither party is really fighting for their core interests. That's not to say there aren't significant differences between the two parties, and I think that we see that playing out right now over the infrastructure battle. But at the end of the day, when gains are so ephemeral and difficult to put your hands on, and promises like recurring $2,000 checks, the $2,000 checks in the first instance, student debt cancellation, et cetera, are reneged upon, you can't blame people for being so politically disaffected.